We now turn our gaze to two terrific professionals, one who I've had the honor of calling a former work colleague a few lifetimes ago, and her partner joining us from Europe. Sarah is originally from Canada, and she now lives in Ireland after living in Australia for about 20 years. Her professional path also took her to Hong Kong and the US, and Sarah Ouellette is the co-founder of Kindora, Europe's platform for the premium resale and overstock of children's goods. She's an alumni of Techstars, which is the program in London in 2021, and she was named the Irish Startup of the Year for 2021. So not even the year's over, and that's a tremendous accolade. Sarah's prior experience includes CNN, Lonely Planet, and Tatler, and she has several tech startup experiences in between. Very honored to have Sarah join us. And with her is Georgie Smallwood, and she is the Chief Product Officer at Tier Mobility, which is an organization with presence in over 130 cities. Tiers is Europe's leading shared micromobility provider and is determined to change mobility for good through the sustainable urban transport. Georgie was formerly the CPO of N26 and was in charge of defining and leading and implementing the company's global product strategy as they grew from an 800,000 to 6 million users, which is phenomenal growth. In Georgie's spare time, she is the founder of Auxilia, a network of women entrepreneurs with the mission of increasing the diversity of VC funding across the globe. Georgie is a passionate founder, board advisor, and investor, and has led large teams at fast-growing companies, mastering the challenges of scaling global businesses with a focus on communication and respect. Georgie enjoys sharing her experiences with the next generation of women leaders, and together with Sarah, is going to talk us through women founders and the VC landscape. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks so much for having us. I think it's awesome to be here. Thanks, Sarah, for inviting me to co-share with you on this amazing topic. I know we can talk about it till we're purple in the face.
Absolutely. And I should say, so Georgie and I, we kind of have had parallel journeys around the world, as well as kind of from Australia to Hong Kong to Europe, but also kind of been following, I think, each other's careers through that time. And so I'm very lucky that Georgie was really excited about Kindora and has been a part of our journey. So it's great to be able to have a conversation about the kind of the greater landscape of what's happening out there for female founders, and kind of some shocking statistics actually, but then also some kind of really great kind of sharp, green shoots that are coming through, and ways that I think women are able to access funding that might be not as obvious as just going down the pure VC front, and fantastic opportunities in kind of growing industries which are very female focused, but have been ignored and have grown kind of around this kind of very challenging VC environment, and are now showing incredible growth and return, and it's very exciting. So we can talk through all that, Georgie. I'm going to share my screen so I can share a presentation here. Just give me 1 second. And Georgie, while I'm doing this, do you want to talk a little bit about Auxilia and kind of what it is?
Yeah, sure. So you're getting two sides of the coin here. So I spend a lot of my time in my career working in kind of high growth scale up organizations, big numbers, big lots of users. But my family background is small business. My dad had an insurance broking company. My brother's a plumber and has a small business with six guys working together. And one of the things I've noticed as I've gone through these big companies is there's just no more women leaders at the top than there was when I started. And it was something that really started to bother me when I moved into more senior executive roles, and realized that the only person that was really going to change it is the people at the top. And I found myself at the top, and I thought, well, what am I doing? And so I talked to a Cell, which is a really big VC company. And one of the things I said to them was, you guys aren't investing. Why? What are the numbers? And we'll talk about the numbers in a second. And I started doing some angel investing, and I started advising. And some of the themes that were coming through were really strong. And it's been amazing to work with Kindora and Sarah on really changing that landscape. And what I really love about what Sarah's doing is she's not just making space for women founders, she's also making space for women investors. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, great. So just to kind of give you, I mean, Georgie, kind of you did a great intro there, kind of where you're coming from and your kind of lens of this. And you know, we kind of, I can't ask for a better intro than what Christina gave me, honestly, fantastic. But I guess the other thing to say is that I think, so I am the co-founder of Kindora. I am a co-founder in the business with, I have a male counterpart. And what we're going to be talking about here, I think a lot of the time, Georgie, is around kind of either single female founded led companies or like female teams who have a very different challenge to, I mean, and we'll talk a bit about kind of where Kindora came from, but I underestimated that like the difference in having a male co-founder with me and the way that was going to change the conversations that we were having, and still it is to this day. I had 3 VCs approach me this week, and it's been very interesting having conversations around the fact that I have a male counterpart, a male co-founder, and the questions that are asked of him versus me. But look, let's talk a bit more about kind of the actual the numbers and what it looks like. So there's some interesting statistics, but 2020 was a really bad year for female founders with VC funding. And out of all of the funding in 2020, 2.3% went to female founded companies. And I think this is a global stat, not a US stat. So it's appalling. It's appalling. And on the flip side of that, like less than 10% of decision makers at VCs globally are women. So you can see how like the way that the decision making is actually being led, how this 2.3% number kind of ends up being reality. And I read a stat, which I thought blew my mind, was that in 5 days, Robinhood raised more money than all female founded businesses had in 2020.
Yeah,
so absolutely. I mean, I know it's like outsized, but that's shocking.
Yeah, and when I read this stat, when it came out from the PitchBook data in about February this year, what was really interesting was I work with a lot of VCs and a lot of proven founders and very successful people. And I went to them and I was like, what? I don't understand. Like, can you explain to me why this is the case? Because if it's 2.3% for women founded companies, but it's also only 11% for founding teams with a woman in it, right? So that means that like 89% of VC funding globally last year went to all male founding teams, which is just like, it just makes my blood boil. And so one of the things that I asked, I was like, well, why is this happening? And they're like, well, deal flow, right? We don't see the companies, I'm like, but that's rubbish, right? Like I live in Berlin. I'm surrounded by amazing women doing really phenomenal things, really commercial, really scalable products, and they don't know them, right? And so this is the problem. The problem is that the network that surrounds VC and surrounds kind of company building is archaic, right? It's generational. It's built on networks that men in general have built over generations through fraternities, through universities. And they honestly, a lot of it is unconscious. There is definitely some conscious bias. But let's work on the unconscious bit. And really, how do we break into that? And that's where Auxilia came about, because Auxilia is something that I started because we are now in a position where there are women, and like myself, who are in positions to help other women. Now, I can't necessarily do it through insane amounts of funding. Like maybe I'll be lucky with an IPO one day, but I can do it through connections. I can do it through advice. And there's this confidence element to it as well, because it's not just women founders that need to grow in confidence. It's also women in general. Like, it took me a long time to realize that I have a lot of experience that can help someone in even just a 45-minute conversation. And I should do that.
Yeah, it's. I think that's really interesting. One of the things that was has been a learning curve for me is, I think I assumed building a business in Ireland or starting a business in Ireland, which is a very kind of, it's talked about in the world as kind of being like a tech hub, right? And that the idea that this is kind of, it's a nation that is actually built on the idea of having amazing companies come and start here. And like, there's a lot of talent here. and international talent as well. And it was incredibly frustrating to be going out into the market and trying to network with other women. It was really hard to find female angel investors, to find advisors, to find people who were working in startups that were not just trying to, were not kind of considered just like, they were almost put on a shelf of, oh, that's just a nice idea, rather than taken seriously. It was a very strange environment, and it felt like it was a real throwback to something that was like a really old way of thinking. And so what was really interesting was like, and I'm just gonna go to the next slide, because I think this is kind of an interesting point, is that like we started Kindora in the middle of a pandemic. And one of the things that, when you read the data, people talk about the fact that like part of the challenge of women having visibility in deal flow, or women having kind of access to these networks in this most recent kind of 12 to 24 months, was that they were the most impacted in family situations by the pandemic. So many women came out of the workforce, and so many women had to kind of, figure out what they were going to do with their kids, and homeschooling and all kinds of things. And it fell on them to do that even their bit of visibility dropped back. And that was really, it happened globally. It wasn't just limited to Europe or, to smaller markets. And I think, are you seeing that in kind of the membership of Auxia, that women are coming back into kind of say, being able to now go back into full-time roles, or back into kind of pursuing ideas or business ideas that they might have had to put on the shelf for a period of time?
Slowly, right? I think this is the point. So there's a lot of psychology behind this as well. So when you're getting momentum, right, and if you see the numbers, like, okay, they're still abysmal, but they were very slowly increasing, right? And we see some great inspirations out there, like Sarah Blakely with Spanx, like Whitney with Bumble. And this is fantastic. But what happened was, not only when women left the workforce or like stepped back from the workforce, sometimes it was just that, they also lost confidence coming back in. And so that is one of the things that I talk a lot about with women, which is, I was doing this, and then I was doing my job, and I was doing this side hustle, and I was doing the mum, and we were kind of running quite well. And then this happened, and I kind of lost my footing. And so we need to build that confidence back up. And the only way we can do that is by connecting with other people who are in the same position, but also with other women who can help get you out of that situation.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm interested in is kind of like some of the statistics that I've read around so scale of raise. So the idea would be like, you talk about confidence being kind of knocked, I think, and then having to build that back up when you come back into that shifting gears in a way, coming back from kind of just having to focus very, very kind of on one specific thing, and then having to focus again on your career, your business. It's like that men are more, they ask for more in a raise. They're more kind of, they're less financially conservative. And I'm seeing that in different ways, in like through Techstars, certainly in our cohort, we're seeing in like the differences in the male and female founders. With your work with Excel, has that kind of, have you gone through a situation where you're saying to someone, you're actually not asking, you're not thinking big enough here?
Almost every conversation.
Right.
So I think the combination is that in general, women ask for less and promise more, which is also the other side of the coin, right? Now, it's also because we're proving, right? Because it's not the you were constantly pushing the boundaries, right? These are pioneer women, and we're constantly wanting to prove. But it's also not just on the women, right? It's also on the VCs, because what we also find, and there's great articles out there on this, there's some awesome stuff by an amazing group in the States, which is called All Raise. And what it is that actually when VCs are asking questions to women-founded teams versus male-founded teams, they also ask a lot about, like, what's your traction? Show us how much, you need to have bootstrapped for a period of time, like prove to us that you know how to do this. Whereas what happens in with the guys is, you don't need to prove it to us, you just need to sell us the idea.
Absolutely.
And so the conversation is completely different. And because of that conversation, women are then building pitch decks. And I had this conversation with female co-founders the other day. And they had this amazing deck, right? They're pre-seed, they're raising $1 million pre-seed. It's a no-brainer, right? But they've got they've got every answer, right? They're going to tell you exactly how they're going to spend that money. In year 4, they're going to turn profitability, and then they're going to write $4.2 million in profit in 4 years. And I was like, don't put that slide in. Right, because firstly, like, no, they're not investing in VC. Don't want to invest in a $4.2 million profit, right? If you want to put a slide in which shows how financially, fiscal you are, then tell me what it's going to look like in 2030, and I want to see a sky high rocket ship, right? I want to see that blow off the charts. Great that you can turn a profit with the $1 million that we give you now. I don't care. I don't invest $1 million for 4 million. I invest $1 million for $1 billion.
Exactly.
And we really need to wrap our heads around that. And what I find is that women tend to want to be accurate, and they feel if they're not being fully transparent and accurate, then they're being dishonest.
Yes.
And that's something we need to get around. I don't believe in dishonesty, and I do believe there is a lot of fabrication in a lot of pitches out there, but I wouldn't invest in those companies. I do believe in potential, right? And with VCs, you need to sell potential.
And the flip side to that, like that flip side to like the potential and like selling the kind of vision and the size of the opportunity. The flip side to that is like when you're in it and you've got the funding and you're delivering, women are actually delivering better returns than men in terms of the 2 to 1.
2 to 1 actually for every dollar invested. Now I have a lot of conversations with VCs about this because from my mind, it's about equality, but that's this holistic level. It's about like the future ideas that we're going to fund. Like I'm really concerned if we're getting, ideas from such a small portion of society, but that's too high to impact today's VC investment managers, right?
Okay.
The reality is at this point in time, the best way to improve your portfolio performance is to add a women-founded company. Now, that might not be the case once we equalize out, but the reality is the barrier is so high at the moment that the women that do get the funding are the cream and the cream of the cream. And so really, if you're an investment manager and you want to, the reality is no one, unfortunately, is going to lose their job for not hitting their diversity quota at this point in time. That's a completely different conversation and whether that's the right thing. But they will lose their job if they don't hit their profitability margins. And it seems bloody stupid that they're not seeing that the most obvious way to do that is by growing women-founded teams.
And I think this comes into like the opportunities, so the ideas. And the reason I put this slide in is because like this is a great example, right? Femtech, where I think that it was this kind of ignored sector that was bubbling away in the background. And certainly some VCs saw the opportunity, obviously, and got involved, and great brands like LV have like flourished, and it's been an amazing ride. But like it's a $3 billion sector right now. It's expected to be 60 billion by 2027. And like the ride that's on, and the people who got in early with that are the ones who really see that actually this was something that was ignored. And part of that is kind of the lens that people were seeing these opportunities with. It wasn't relevant. It wasn't relevant. So why would you see that opportunity? And that brings in the whole conversation around decision makers and kind of variety of points of view. And that way you can't ignore the opportunity because it's so relevant to you, and so you dig deeper into it to find out more about what is the opportunity there versus, I don't know about this, it doesn't affect me, I don't want, like, why would I invest in it, moving on to the next thing. And so I'm interested in kind of how, I mean, in Kindora is certainly, we operate in a very kind of, it's similar space where we're talking about kids and babies. And it's, yes, many people are parents. We talk a lot about the fact that families come in all shapes and sizes, and you don't have to be a parent to be a part of a family. But it doesn't necessarily resonate in the same way, even with men who are fathers or uncles. I don't think that resonates in the same way. So I'm curious about, like, I mean, you've backed and you've championed a number of kind of amazing businesses that are in industries that are very female centric. What is the advice you give them?
So I think one of the things we need to do is, firstly, not lots of investors say, oh yeah, but a lot of women founders, they build products around mental health or women's challenges, and I'm just interested in fintech and SaaS. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't need another bank. We need these problems. And you're right, they're not on the forefront. Like I'll give you an example. I've invested in fintech, like female investment platforms. I've invested in Oviavo, which is a fertility benefits startup. I've invested in multiple mental health platforms. And I think that one of the challenges is that women are seeing these problems more often than men are. So women are the ones that are raising kids in a digital world. Women are the ones that went home and saw the impact that COVID is having on their family and the mental health of their family. So that's why we're starting to see solutions come out from women on these things. And these are the next pandemic. Right. And if we don't have the right solutions, what's really interesting is that, for instance, when I pitched Oviavo and when I invested in Oviavo, that one of the partners from Acel reached out and he said, can you hook me up with them? We're going through this journey. So one of the things that women are doing is actually shining a light on some quite taboo topics. From a societal perspective. And I think that is fantastic, because as we bring them out and we air conversation, actually we're going to get a lot more investment in it from men and from women. But one of the things I do suggest, because I know we're running out of time, is be hyper commercial, right? Like create value-driven products, build the right things, build the right solutions, but be hyper commercial. And maybe you as a founder aren't hyper commercial, so find a co-founder that is, because we have to prove it, right? And we can, the numbers are there, right? But we have to get past the lump of it's a fluffy conversation. I don't know what's fluffy about fertility or mental health or women's reproductive system. There's nothing fluffy. But because they've been taboo topics, we need to overlay them with really commercial numbers. And you cannot fight data, right? And it doesn't have to be that you've proven it and people are paying already. It has to be total addressable market. It has to be penetration of the issue. It has to be. So I think be hyper commercial in these traditionally women founded areas.
Yeah. And like that advice is like, we got that advice really early on. And like, just kind of, I wanted to walk through Kindora as a case study, just because like we're in this journey now. And like, so one of the things, like, this is what Kindora is. We are a digital platform that is like a resale and overstock platform for babies and children's goods. The whole idea is we are the Vestiaire collective for baby goods. So it's all the premium end. We have authentication, we have quality control. We do all of the hard work for people to be able to unlock the value of these things. So like the antithesis to mass marketplaces. And I think what's been interesting for us is like, we got into Techstars this year, which has been fantastic and has supercharged us. We obviously won some awards, but more importantly, like we were able to kind of make the case that like these baby goods that maybe, surely there are parents who are pushing a pram that cost to buy brand new, almost 2,000 euro. And people have no idea how expensive these things are. So for us to try and kind of build a narrative that was like, sure, these might look like, they are baby goods, but if you put them on par with what the other items in the same price range are, we're talking about a brand new iPhone, or we're talking about a great camera lens, or luxury products. And so a lot of times when we were talking to male investors, trying to draw those parallels was so important, because the conversation just went, they weren't even able to get their heads around the size of the opportunity. I actually had an investor say to me 45 minutes into a pitch, after like really getting out to brass tacks and talking about solid commercials for 45 minutes, say to me, oh, but when your baby gets older, you're just going to get bored of this, right? And I it was one of those moments where I thought, no, surely he's kidding. Like, surely this is not a serious comment. And it just blew the whole conversation out of the water. And it was like, those kinds of moments, they just remind you of the fact that you're just not on the same level or playing field in this person's mind, that your idea isn't even on the same level. So even like doing all the work you're trying to do to get them there, some people just won't get there. And like for us, like, again, like this is just kind of showing like kind of how we were showing people why this is important to accelerate what we were doing. We were really fact-based, and we were talking about the fact that resale in fashion is growing 25 times faster than, like, all these facts you can't dispute. And ultimately we raised $500,000. We did not have majority female investors, but the women wrote the biggest tickets. So actually 64% of our funding comes from women. And it's been a stat that we're very proud to talk about, but it also, for me, shows two things. It shows us that, like, we spoke to a number of female angel investors who are also linked to funds, VC funds in some way. And that was a really interesting path for us to start those conversations with the right funds, rather than just having to, like, I don't know, prove ourselves every single time with a new conversation. Some of our best investors, including you, Georgie, like you get it, and you're with us from the beginning. And so people who want to take us further, they will understand the performance and the, like, the fundamentals of the business. And they kind of, it doesn't matter that we're kind of, that I'm a woman and this is about baby stuff. But the other thing was that, like, we had fewer women commit, but those who committed, man, they're really in. And they are, like, not just in terms of cash, they are like, they are giving us their time, they are giving us their connections, they are giving us, like, whatever is possible. So the value of those investors is very different to our male investors. And so I think that, like, for me, someone asked me, a VC asked me recently, like, what do you look for in an investor? And I said, I'm looking for someone who understands the scope of the opportunity, that it's massive, who gets that this is not about just babies and kids. This is a big kind of generational shift, and they buy into that. But finally, I want to work with people who are nice and who get it, and who are not just going to speak to me because I am a woman and I'm ticking a box for them. Like, we get on and they understand where we're going, and they want to be a part of that journey. And I want to talk to those people every week. That's what I have to, that was my kind of criteria, was, do I want to call you every week and have a conversation? If I don't, it's going to be hard. We're going to have a hard time. So yeah, it's been a journey.
And I think it's hard to find those. I mean, you did an amazing job of finding people, right? And really looking out and really saying, okay, and who else should I talk to, and manually going through that. And it is a bit like that at the moment. So one of the things I would recommend, so join Auxilia. I just posted the links in the channel. We have a number of different things, right? It's like work out what level you want to be a part of it. There's a great LinkedIn group, which has got like 1,000 people in it, and there's a heap of really helpful content in there. We actually surveyed the group and asked what kind of content they were missing, and then I went and had that content created. So the Medium page has that content on it. It's got a lot about product market fit, raising money, do you need to worry about legal stuff, that kind of thing. And then we have a great community platform where I'm about to start a new channel called Pitch Me. Right? Because we have a lot of women who are part of starter programs or angel investments on their own. And one of the things that we want to see, like, we want you to pitch us. So if you have something ready, if you want to talk about it, you can pitch us there, or you can ask, right, in the other channels about help that you might need, and there's real life meetups happening in London and Berlin and Paris all the time, being self-organized by the group. So I think you need to surround yourself with people who get it, like Sarah said.
And I think what you're doing is you are building those networks that have been around for generations for men who are in the investment side of things. You're starting to, like, essentially kind of, you're building that for women. And I think that's really powerful. And so I think more of that is happening all around us. And so I think one of the things that I have learned in the last year, I would say, and I've had a few people come to me who are just starting out with ideas, and they asking how we raised our angel round and stuff. And the thing that I always say to people is, you got to get past the idea that it's scary to reach out to somebody you don't know and have a conversation and ask outright, like, where do I find female investors? Where do I find women who are going to have this conversation and back me and understand what I'm doing? Where do I find VCs who are committed to having female decision makers, who are not just saying it and then, investing in a couple of female founded companies because they have to tick a box and that looks good for them? Like, who's really doing it? And interview, if you're talking to VCs, interview them. Is the other thing that I think is really great, is, like, ask them all the questions, because they're going to be your best friends for a while. And if you don't buy into what they're telling you around their diversity play and their real kind of their real ethos around kind of supporting different points of view in their portfolio, they're not going to do it. So yeah, I think I mean, I hope that hopefully this was helpful for people who are listening, and they can kind of see that like it is a challenging climate, but it's changing, and we're all very lucky to kind of have each other to help each other through it. And like the next set of women coming through, just kind of being able to help them through that whole process is super important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah and Georgie. Appreciate that. And Sarah, great to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Blake.
Hope you're doing really well. Nice to connect with you, Georgie. Thank you so much for the enlightening presentation. Sarah, I want to start with the cringeworthy. I'm so sorry to ask this, but you said questions that were being asked of him were different to the questions that were being asked of me.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit, please.
So I was asked a lot of questions about my personal life, about my baby, about my a lot of questions more around me as a person than about what I brought to the table in my professional experience, or what why I was fully kind of equipped to lead this company. And my co-founder, who is also a father, was never asked about his kids, was never asked about, what was it like when you were a new dad? None of those questions. So we've got to a place now where we have a dynamic to kind of be able to highlight that difference in a way that kind of, it almost like makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but in a good way. Do you know what I mean? So it's like really just saying, hold on, are you really doing this? Do you really want to go down this path of like asking me all these questions about my kid and then asking Barry all the questions about like on the business side? You don't want to do that. Let's flip that around a little bit. And that's kind of the way we play it, but it happens.
Yeah, good approach. Sorry to hear that those questions come at you and that's still happening. A little bit pathetic, but congratulations on the raise. Have been watching your business from afar and makes a ton of sense. I agree that there's a massive target addressable market for you. So all the very best. I do want to ask a quick question, Georgie, about this concept of being hyper commercial. Can we dig into that a little bit? If you're talking to any founder, what is it you mean when you say hyper commercial? Is it understanding the TAM, the target addressable market? Is it the unit economics? Is it all of the above? How do you think about encouraging someone to be hyper commercial?
So I think one of the things I look at when I'm investing in a company is potential multiple revenue streams. Because if one thing we've learned in COVID is that if you have one revenue stream, you're probably going to run into trouble at some point. And so being able to articulate the potential revenue streams, and yes, you need to understand your unit economics and your cost base and things like that, but also use commercial language, right? So this is the other thing, like you need to talk about cohorts, right? Whereas what we would talk about is actually, well, our first users did this, right? Where if you can say cohort 1, and we're talking about monthly cohorts here, cohort 1 performance was X, we made some changes in cohort 3, this is the performance uptake that we saw, and now we're getting a return on investment of X and a customer lifetime value of Y. And I think, just listen to some of the great Shark Tank pitches, right? Like, and the stuff that, not the bad ones, just the good ones, just the ones that win investment, maybe. And really think about how you speak about things. And it's a bit of extra work, unfortunately, right? So you do need to learn it, and then you need to be comfortable learning it. So don't try and, turn into an investment banker. But know your key numbers, know what language you want to use so that they understand it. I mean, and this applies to everything, right? So I'm a product leader, and we talk a lot about discovery and hypotheses and research. And if you go into an executive team of a scale-up commercial business and you start talking about hypotheses and research, they just see cost, right? So all I do is say, okay, if we were an investment company, no investment company invests in every pitch that crosses their deck, right? You do due diligence. So you have different layers of DD. So you have, you do a first layer and you cut out all the people that you don't want to invest in. Then you have a list of people that you think you want to invest in. You do additional due diligence on that. And then you invest in the ones that you want to. Discovery is due diligence. And they're like, okay, I get it. Because what we don't get is that sometimes when you're talking to people who are like so stuck in this hyper business world, they only think that way. So when you start to talk about stories and context, often you can throw them off their game, and they do not like that, right? So if you want the money from them, you need to adjust to their language and bring it in, because I promise you, you know all the stuff that they want to know. You might just be speaking different languages.
And just to jump in,
sorry,
just to say that, like, that advice that Georgie's given, I think one of the things that really helped us was like when we started to kind of to do our fundraise, it was like learning a new language. I was always telling that to people, like, I didn't know what these acronyms meant. I didn't know, there were lots of terminology that was just like, I didn't know. And what helped us was we had some really trusted advisors who we could go to and say, like, what is it that what are the actual words that I need to say here to get these people to understand what I know is a strong idea. And so having that kind of set of people around you who are going to give you that direction is so valuable. Even if they're not investors, they're advisors, and it really helps.
Sarah, just quickly on that then, how many no doubt you learned through each of the different pitches you had to do and meeting different types of investors, the round sizes that were typical for them, the series and the categories that they liked. How many different investors, just give the audience some sense, because it's actually no different whether you're selling a business or actually raising money for a business. You tend to have to meet a lot of people, pitch to a lot of people, negotiate a lot. So how many investors are we talking about that you went out to?
So I would say from when did I start raising investment? We started it was over the summer. So like June. I'm going to say I probably spoke to 100 people. Wow. And I would say in that 100, the thing that was really interesting to me was how quick people were able to say, this isn't for me, but I'm going to pass you on to 2 more people who I think are interested. So actually, I started with a very small network of people who quickly grew that. And out of that, even today, we just confirmed another set of investors, a syndicate, on our oversubscription of our round. And that was a conversation that came out of 2 investors who didn't invest, but they passed us on to a syndicate who have now come in, and they're kind of sitting in the background watching what's happening so that potentially at seed round, they'll come into that round. So it's a really interesting network that you're cultivating. It's a lot of talking. Thank God. I mean, honestly, thank God it was a lot on Zoom. It would have been a lot of coffees in a lot of places. Otherwise I would have been wired, but it was really like, it was a marathon. It was a marathon.
And I suppose, sorry, Christina, you go.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I didn't want to. That was a follow-up question, but I was interested, Sarah. You talked a little bit about. You mentioned it as a blip, networking, but also finding the right networks of women-led funders. I always associate someone seeking funding as not really being in the position to be picking and choosing, but you really spoke from a point of strength around, no, do your own homework and find the funders you want to do business with. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, I think that the strongest and scariest thing we did was say no to funding. And it was because as we were kind of doing that, we were interviewing people as much as they were interviewing us about the business. And I think from the beginning, we knew that we wanted to have people on the journey with us who, like I keep saying, like, I wanted to be able to talk to these people weekly and feel like we weren't doing it out of just because we had to. It was because we wanted to. And I know that's a luxury that not everybody has, but we being able to go in and say, okay, this person wants to invest in us. Are they the right fit or not? And also, like, I think just being a little bit brave and having to say, look, are you interested in investing, or are you doing any angel investments, or do you know someone who is interested in doing some angel investments? Understanding things like various kind of tax arrangements for individual angel investors in various markets or wherever you're based or wherever you're looking for funding. That's also really important because the motivation for those angels is different. And it also feeds then into the bigger VC kind of conversation. So that was all stuff that we learned as we were going. And I wish we'd known it before, but we learned it as we were going through those conversations.
And there's also something that you speak to culture and how the women led and women at the leadership of a business really influences the culture of an organization, such that, to your point, you want to be able to speak to people every day. I see Georgie nodding her head, the impact of women on culture.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Georgia can speak to this more than I can, but certainly I think one of the things that we're already seeing in our investor set, which is quite diverse, but like I said, it's not female, majority female founders or sorry, investors, is that within that though, we have a good diversity of viewpoints. And I think that like, that's where we're seeing this like really nice culture is developing within our investor set, I would say, that is forming, it is reflective of what we are as a business. And one of our kind of key brand values actually is that we're for families of all shapes and sizes. So it's very important for us that our investor set reflects that. And so really actually at the moment when we're talking to VCs for our seed round, it's a question we openly ask, like, are you investing in, what is your diversity kind of, what is your diversity thinking? Are you actively investing in women, in kind of minority founders, in ideas that are not just, they are kind of social responsibility ideas? Like, how are you actually doing this? And if we don't believe them, we don't continue the conversation.
Yeah, I do. You've given some great inspiration. Packed session of content. And I think you've inspired a resource area for potential resources for particularly women who are looking for funding and or founders and running businesses on the blog section of Flippa. So I'll be circling back to you and Georgie for some good resources that we can build out as part of a follow-up to your session. So thank you very much on my behalf. Blake, anything else to add?
No, extraordinarily insightful, and really, really appreciate the wisdom.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.